Hey guys, it's Philip from the Honda Resource, and I'm coming to you with another video for the 7th Gen Civic today. So today we've got, I think, a 2002 Civic in here, and it needs a motor. So we're going to get this motor swapped out, and I'm going to give you some tips so that you can swap your motor even if you're putting in a Japanese motor or if you're doing a VTEC model. This is a non-VTEC, but I'm going to show you all the things that you need to change so that you can do this right at home. So as I mentioned, this is a non-VTEC D17A1. Now, there's some variations if you have a D17A2, but overall, they're very similar. So the D17A2 is the VTEC model. So if you have a Japanese motor, you get one of those Japanese motors off of eBay or an engine importer, it's a D17A. Those are VTEC motors, and if you want to put it into your EX equipped car, which would be like a replacement for a D17A2, I'll show you what you need to change. But for this instance, this is an automatic car. And for the automatic car, I like to just pull the engine alone. Now, if this was manual, we would have to drop the subframe and everything and drop the whole thing. You could probably get it without doing the subframe and pulling it up at an angle, but I find that usually if I had to pull the transmission at all, it's just easier to go through the bottom. With the automatic, you can unbolt it from the transmission, leave the transmission in the car, and you can just remove the engine alone. So that's a good thing about the automatics. So this will be a two-part series. The first part will be removing the engine. The second part will be reinstalling the engine. So let's get to it. First thing we need to do is disconnect the battery. It's usually easier just to disconnect the negative. So a lot of times you can just grab the terminal and twist them, but it looks like these are pretty tight. So just get a 10mm and loosen that off and take the ground off. So this one came to me without the airbox and stuff on it, so I can't really show you taking it off. However, I can tell you where the bolts are. So there is a little 8mm bolt or on the clamp that's on the back side, so it'd be about right here. It would come in from the driver's side, and you get it right here. Usually I can do it without taking that clamp off. You just wiggle the air box once you get the other bolts out, and it'll come off. So to begin with, you have to take your outer piece of the air box off. It would be like over here, and it has like a bolt right here, and it has one right here, and then one right down here, and then I think two up here where it connects to the upper air box. And you take this outer air box off, and there's also a little tube that comes through here that connects over to it. It's got like a rubber coupler. So I just take that rubber coupler off, and I don't usually take off the whole piece here. Just take off the rubber coupler, and then you can take that outer air box off. And then on the upper one, like I said, it's got the 8mm clamp, or 8mm on the clamp here. I usually don't loosen that. And then, but once you have the outer one off, it's just two bolts, and they're like, it doesn't even have the bracket on here for it, but it have like a bolt here and like a bolt back here somewhere, right on the back side of the valve cover. So once you get those two bolts out, they're 10mm. All these bolts are 10mm besides the one on the clamp. You can just rock that box back and forth, and it'll come up, and then you'll have like the air intake temperature sensor. You could it's inside of the air box, but usually I just disconnect it here and then leave this actual sensor in the air box. All right, so the next things we're going to do is get the power steering pump off. So it's got two 12mm nuts, one like right here, and then one right down here. It's kind of behind that belt. It's a little difficult to get to. I find it easier if you like remove this reservoir. You can kind of see it right there. Get that 12 out and this 12, and then remove this 10, and the whole pump is going to slide off. And then with the reservoir loose like this, you can just take the whole pump assembly and lay it up here. I'll show you in 1 second. But first, before we get the power steering pump off, we need to remove these two 10mm bolts to hold the AC line bracket here. So just take this 10 and that 10 out. It takes a little bracket off. All right, so once I got the bolts loose on this, I usually just take this, the adjuster, roll it forward so it'll clear the line, then pull it straight out. Just roll it till it'll come out through there. And I didn't even loosen the actual adjuster here. I just took the nut off of this part and the little 10mm out of the top. And then, like I said, once that's loose, just take it, lay it up there out of the way like that. So now that we got the power steering pump out of the way, we need to get the alternator off because we got to get all the accessories off. So we need to go ahead and take this 12mm bolt out here that holds the power steering reservoir bracket. That way that our alternator bolt will slide all the way out to where we can get the alternator off. All right, and to get the alternator out, there's a 14mm bolt here on top. You can see I've already starting to loosen it. And there's a little 12mm on the bottom. I'll get to that in a second. But we need to get the wires off. So there's a little tab right here. Like right there, you push it down. And then it'll allow this wiring harness to slide off the bracket. There's a 10mm right here under this little boot. Hold on the charge wire. And then we got a connector here on the front that holds our, it's got the 4-wire connector. All right, so like I said, it has a little 4-wire connector. It has this little part you have to push, and it faces towards the passenger side. So if you grab it, pull it loose, and then there you can see the little tab you had to push down to get this bracket off right here. And then the 10mm nut is under this boot. So we got that off. And now I can show you where that 12mm is on the bottom of the adjuster. So we'll take that 12mm out right there in the center of the screen, bottom of the alternator, and then we can take our alternator off. The bottom bolt looks like this. Got the big head on it. It's 12mm. Then on the upper one it's 14. Like I said, I'm already starting to loosen that one. I still got to loosen a little more. And it'll slide out, but it won't be able to get it out all the way. And if you don't take off that power steering bracket, you're not going to be able to slide out far enough to get the alternator out. But it'll slide out enough to where the alternator will come out now. There you can see the bolt slid out. It's touching the frame rail over here. It won't come out, but it's over there far enough that the alternator will slide out like so. Lifts it up and out. And then slide this bolt back in. All right, and then we got to take off the bracket, the lower adjuster bracket. This is a 14mm bolt right there. You have to get these bolts that holds the AC compressor. It's got 4, it's got 2 up top and 2 on the bottom. So the 2 on the bottom are a little more difficult to get to, but you can get to the top ones fairly easy. There's one right here behind this AC line. And one here. I don't discharge the AC and don't really have any issues, so no need to discharge the AC. Get those down there, it's pretty difficult to get anything in there besides maybe just a regular hand ratchet with a shallow well 12mm. All right, so you can see there I got those 2 top bolts loose. They don't come all the way out right now because of the fans interfering with them. I know you can't really see that, but they hit the fan, and that's fine. They're loose. They're not into the bracket, so we're good there. So now, I guess we'll finish taking off some more of this stuff up here. All right, so a good bit of this stuff is you're just gonna need a flathead and 10mm to get out. You'll need a flathead to get this coil pack cover off. So you just need to turn them to where they're not side to side. You need it front to back, and then it'll come off. All right, and then these coil packs each have a 10mm. Hold them. If you want to take the coil packs out, you can. I like to go ahead and take the whole harness off of the engine because I don't take the actual harness off of the car. So with that being said, we got to take all this harness here off of the engine. Again, 10mm. All right, the throttle cable. All right, and then there's a throttle cable bracket back here. All right, and then there's a bracket right here that holds the heater core hoses. All right, and another thing I like to do, this boot is off the intake box. Another thing I like to do is unbolt the throttle body too. It just makes it that much simpler because there's a hose back here that's kind of difficult to get to if you don't take the throttle body off. So it's just 4 10mm around it. Simple enough. All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and take my ground strap off here. And then also I'm gonna take off the bracket here that's on the back of the valve cover. All right, so I think that's gonna wrap up the 10mm for a minute. All right, so now we need to work on getting the wiring harness off of it now that we've got most of these other lines and stuff loose. You can see the bracket here is loose for our AC line, so I just kind of like to slide it to the back here. And I guess you could technically just lift this little tab right here and slide it off. Then you don't have to worry about that. But we got to get this wiring harness off, get these throttle cables off. So the throttle cables, we've already loosened the bracket, so you can just roll the cable around. It's got a little slot where it'll slide out of the bracket. And then do the same for the other cable. This is the cruise one. Alright, so we got both of those loose, and we had already disconnected them here. So I like to just take the cables and just lay them over the fender. Now if you have really nice paint, you may want to put a towel under there. Most of these cars that I work on don't exactly have nice paint, so I'm not really worried about it too much. I've never really scratched the paint with one, but in the event that you want to be super precautious, put a rag under it. Alright, so back to getting this harness off. Gotta get all these little connectors off. Most of them just have little tabs to push in. Get them off until the heat's been getting on here and it's breaking a lot of the clips. Alright, so that's the injectors. Got our TPS unhooked, our map sensor unhooked, our EVAP, and then we got our aisle air control. Alright, and then our cam position. This one may be a little more difficult to get to if you have an EX model. The EX model has all the ABS module right here. It makes it a lot tighter to fit in here. But that's the cam position. And then we need to do the crank position sensor, and it's down here at the bottom. This is our replacement motor, but you can see that's the crank position sensor, and you see how it just goes through here. And then we got to remove this connector. This one is it's the knock sensor, but also there's a little tab right there, and there's one right there to get it off. See how that comes off. But it got a little knock sensor like that. It's on the back side. Just figured it's easier to show you on this motor that we're putting back in it than it is to actually show you in the car. While we're here, I'll go ahead and show you on the other side of the motor. At the back right here is the oil pressure switch, so we'll have to disconnect that one as well. It's just a little single wire, but that's all the wiring on the back side. So the first of those wires was right back here that you have to disconnect, right down here by the water pump, and then the single wire for the oil pressure switch is like down in there. So just make sure you get those disconnected. Once you get this loose from back here, you can see that all that harness pulls up, and then also we can go ahead, it disconnects right here like so. Get it off these coil packs. Alright, then we got our Ect sensor, and if it had an EGR it would be here, and just have a little connector on there with 6 wires in it. You disconnect that. If it had VTEC, the VTEC solenoid would be right here, and it would have a plug right here and one like on the back side back here, and just disconnect those two. Let's see, this comes up and over. Let me put this back on the tripod. We'll do it like that, that way I'm not shaking around and stuff and not showing you guys the whole picture. All right, so got this loose. This is pretty much loose, right? We need to take this coolant line off of the throttle body. We may lose a little coolant right here. I'm not sure. I haven't drained the radiator yet. Oh, well, actually no, because the radiator is leaking from the thermostat housing. So you may want to drain your coolant before you do this. All right, so I slid that connector back, or that clamp. All right, and then also take a loose here. This one has a screw clamp, but typically it has one of those little spring clamps like the other one where it came off the throttle body. Let's use a flathead real quick. Knock this out. All right, and then I just take this little hose and lay it up out of the way, and that clears up our harness to be coming out. I just disconnected that oil pressure switch back there that I was telling you about earlier. So we have two little spots here to hold the wiring harness on to a bracket. So just a little tab, this one here, and then on the back it just slides on. So you just slide it over and back, and then now you can see that our harness is disconnected. All right, and then again, if you haven't drained the radiator, I would go ahead and do that now, because now we've got to remove like the heater hoses. Let's go ahead and remove our fuel lines. So you have this little black piece like this. This is a little protector, it goes over your fuel line, just pulls straight up, and it's got two little tabs on our fuel line, so they'll be sticking out of the fuel line, right? So it's like, they look like that on the fuel line. You just squeeze them and then pull this out, and this will still be on your steel line. I just took it out for demonstration. Got another little hose off. I like to just tuck these back over here out of the way. Take our other little coolant line off of the throttle body. And then the throttle body is going to have two little evap hoses on it, like so. Tell somebody's been into this before, but that's not factory. So then this hose is the reason I took the throttle body off. It's just difficult to get to it if you left the throttle body on. And it's not impossible to do, but it's just so much simpler to pull the throttle body. All right. There we go. And also, if you have a Japanese motor, you'll have to swap the throttle body anyway to retain cruise control. The Japanese motors don't have cruise control. So, just another thought. Oh, there's a 10mm I missed. Alright, so we had one last 10mm right here holding the wiring harness to the thermostat housing. And then we got our fan switch. It's a little 2-wire plug there. Go ahead and disconnect our O2 sensors. Now, if you have an EX, it's only going to have, like a VTEC motor, it's only going to have one O2 sensor up here, and it's going to have another one towards the back. On the LX and DX, it has the catalytic converter up here, so it has both the O2 sensors up front. But on the EX, the VTEC model, has the catalytic converter like back under the car. And then we had to take these heater hoses off, like I mentioned earlier. All right, and our other heater hose is right back here. It's like right there. All right, I'm gonna get the drain pan for that one because it's trying to leak out a little bit. All right, and while that's draining, you can go ahead and take off the radiator hoses. Typically those have spring clamps too. Somebody has put worm gear clamps on these, so I just disconnect them like from the thermostat housing there, and then I just bend them back and tuck them into the fan assembly. Really no need to take them completely out. I remember the first time I did a engine on one of these, man, I pulled the whole front bumper off to get the radiator out and all this nonsense, but I didn't know. I didn't have videos such as this for guidance. All right, so now I just need to get this exhaust manifold out of here. We're back here on the lower side of the car. We've got to get these two bolts out. They're two spring bolts that holds the manifold to the downpipe. Now, again, if you had an EX model, you have a catalytic converter. I think it's like right here. So you could actually disconnect your downpipe. So, or you could take the downpipe out. But as you see with the LX and the non-VTEC, it has the pipe that goes all the way back. These are two 12mm bolts. Got a little exhaust hanger right here. This little rubber hanger. Just slide it off and then let this pipe hang it'll hang and be out of your way. And then it'll give us access to get to this plate. Like this is like a support bracket that holds basically the engine to the transmission, so we need to remove that. It's 12 here and here, and then 14 here and here. And that'll give us access to get to our torque converter bolts. Now again, if you have a, all kinds of stuff falling out of that. If you have a EX model, it's gonna be a little bit different. It'll have two little individual brackets here and here. The EX model has an aluminum oil pan, so it's just a little bit different here. So don't be alarmed if yours looks slightly different. So now I've got to remove these couple of brackets here just to get me access to get this dust shield off so I can get to these torque converter bolts. These are 10 millimeter. All right, and then it's easy to go ahead and remove the two 10 millimeter bolts here also that holds the shift cable. That way you can just grab the shift cable and pull it backwards. All right, and then you got one 10 millimeter bolt right here that holds on the dust shield. So it should come off now. Well, I guess we're gonna have to take the shift cable completely off. It's been a minute since I've done one of these, so kind of working my way through it. On this little bolt here, it has two little ears that you have to bend up and just use a flathead screwdriver. Bend them up out of the way to where you can get this 10 millimeter bolt out. And slide the shift cable off. And there's our dust shield. Alright, so now you can see we have access to our torque converter bolts. And those are all 10 millimeter. So what we've got to do is use a 19 millimeter to turn the crankshaft. Now, I will say, if you have a motor that slung a rod, sometimes the rod will get jammed in the block, and it makes it really difficult to turn the crankshaft to be able to get these torque converter bolts out. I've had to basically disassemble the engine from the bottom side to get like half a rod out of the motor or something so that I could spin it to get all these torque converter bolts out. So it may be a little difficult. This motor just has some other issues. They ran it so hot that it won't start anymore. So instead of fixing it, we just elected to go ahead and replace the motor. Anyways, eight torque converter bolts. They're all 10 millimeter. And we just turn the crankshaft counterclockwise to get all these bolts out. All right, and once you get all the bolts out of the flex plate here, you should be able to spin the torque converter by hand. If you can, so we're good there. I guess while we're here, we can go ahead and see if we can get these couple of bell housing bolts out. I'm gonna take this wheel off too because we'll have to remove this crankshaft pulley off of here. So if you need to know how to take the wheel off, it's just a 19 millimeter, but it's a 19. And then it gives us access to our crank pulley. And now that we've got the flex plate bolts out, we can go ahead and get this off too. And by taking the crank pulley off, it's going to allow the motor to slide over more to be able to clear the transmission when we're taking it out. The crank pulley likes to hit the frame rail when you're taking it out, so just go ahead and take it out. All right, so the bell housing bolts are 17 millimeter, and the ones I'm going to take out while I'm down here, one is just above the axle here. It's not these two. These just hold on the T-bracket. They'll stay on there. They're on the transmission. But it's just above the axle right here. And then right there. I may get that one while I'm down here too. So, all right, so I went ahead and got both of those bolts out. They both look like this. Now I guess we'll let it down and see if I can get some more of this out. Sometimes they do have a little bracket here that supports the lower manifold to the block. It's a 14 millimeter where it bolts to the block. Just go ahead and take that out too. This one don't have it, so I can't really show it to you. We gotta finish getting this exhaust manifold out of here because we don't need it in our way. Typically, these have a heat shield over them. And you can still get to all the bolts with the heat shield on. Somebody's taking this off, and obviously you can see they've been Doing some welding on it with it looks like a flux core welder. These are typically 12 millimeters. It's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts, or well, really 2 bolts, 3 nuts. So the bottom are nuts, the top are bolts. So yeah, I'm going to get this zipped off real quick, and we'll be able to pull the manifold out and up. Now I got the exhaust manifold out. We'll finish getting these 3 more bell housing bolts. Since we've got those other 2 out already, there's like one right here by the VIN tag. There's like one right into the thermostat housing, and there's one right back here. That's the last 3 of the bell housing bolts. This last bolt right here on the front by the VIN tag is going to be the most trickiest one to get to because of just where it's at, the transmission lines and stuff. All right, so I got the last bell housing bolt out, and it has a little bracket on it that holds the O2 sensors. Yep, so now I need to get my engine hoist in here and hook it to this motor. So here I've got a couple straps on here. I just kind of generally put one around the thermostat housing here, and then another one back here. On the back of the head there's a hole, like a threaded hole, and I just put a longer 14 millimeter bolt in there. I just use some old seat belts from the junkyard. I like them for their adjustability. And then over here I just got a ratchet strap on this one. So just gonna lift up a little bit and get the tension off this mount, and then take these 3 nuts off of that. Get those 3 nuts off of this, and this just lifts off. And then the motor should slide over. There we go. Just grab the hoist and pull it over a couple times, and it came off of the torque converter there. You may have to use a flathead or a pry bar or something to put between the torque converter and the flex plate, just to get it, sometimes they're stuck, so just to get it unstuck there. But now I can lift it up a little bit and get the bottom 2 bolts off of the AC compressor. All right, so you can see I didn't lift it too high, but I got it high enough now that I can get to those bolts on the bottom, and it gave me clearance to be able to get those out. So now that I got the AC compressor completely unbolted, take the line and lay it over to the side like that, and it gives us clearance. Now you may want to take these 3 14 millimeter bolts out too, and just take this mount out. Gives you a little more clearance to where this little tab part isn't sticking out and grabbing your motor. You see there how it's hitting here. So if you take this out, it gives you just a little more clearance and makes it a little less headache. All right, so you can see I got the mount out now, and now the motor is ready to come out. So I just kind of try to keep this AC line over here to the side while I use my engine hoist to pick it up. So, have to prop the hood back further. 04, 05 Civics have a revision in the hood where you can actually put the prop back on the side here, but with the 01 to 03 it don't. It has it like here, and you can't really get it in that spot and be able to have clearance for the engine, so I just kind of stick it over here and it works. But yeah, let's see how trying to take this over with it. Just keep moving it to the side. All right, so I got the engine hoist, and obviously I've got the engine picked up high enough now to slide it out. So I guess that'll conclude video 1 of the removal of the D17A1, and so on video 2, I'll show you the necessary things you have to swap over, like if you're putting a JDM D17A on it, and show you how you can make that work flawlessly with your US spec car. So be sure to check out video 2 of the reinstallation and the tips and tricks on putting the D17A into it. See you on the next one, guys. Peace. Oh, also, be sure to like the video, comment, let me know if it helped you. And always I appreciate those subscribes and the shares. It's wonderful. Thanks.